You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Today, my guest is going to help us with an area that I think is a concern and probably often goes unspoken. It has to do with the idea of if you are someone who is working hard at work, but you have the burden of a loved one at home who needs caregiving, and you are assuming both of those roles simultaneously. It's a big burden and a big issue that often doesn't go talked about very much. But today we are. We're going to spend some time doing that. My guest is a lady named Hanna Kok, and she is from the Netherlands. Hanna, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And even though I'm from the Netherlands originally, I am living in South Africa now.
Oh, fascinating. I had not picked that up in your notes, but good. Well, so let's kind of dive right in. Explain a little bit of your backstory and how you got into this very significant and meaningful work.
Well, what happened is that I'm living that experience. I have my own business and I have a husband that has several health issues. He is partly paralyzed on the left and he has Parkinson's on top of that. He can still walk at least, and he does as much as he can to assist, but he cannot live on his own. So if I ever want to go somewhere for longer than a day, I need somebody to look after him.
And how long have you been dealing with that?
He has been like this since it started in 2014 when he had a major operation on his neck because of the semi-paralyzed situation. And then it got worse in 2020, but only up till 22. At that stage, up to that time, I was living on I was living somewhere else, and I had help in the home. I had a gardener who was also living on our property. So if there was a problem, he was always on standby. Now we moved the end of 22 to another place, and I don't have that backup anymore. So basically in the last 2.5 years, I'm dealing with it on my own.
Mm. Now you have developed your own, I'll call it a framework, I guess, for thinking about your own health and well-being, juggling those responsibilities, and it is a teaching and a program you offer to others. Tell us a little more about what you discovered and how you're addressing those things.
Yeah, because I was so faced with the situation, and before I just wanted to make sure that I did not get bitter about it, because it can be very frustrating when you have to consult, get help in whenever you want to go somewhere. And then, I'm a life coach by profession, so it was time to coach myself. And I started analyzing my life. And I'm also, one of my field of expertise is to look at the mind-body connection. Because I've been trained to know that any illness, there is a very strong emotional component to it, if not a cause to it. It depends on how far you want to stretch that belief. And I have several books about it, and it said about Parkinson's and even the paralysis is like you're stuck. And I thought, that's interesting. So I have a husband now that is stuck. Now, this is my second husband. I lost my first husband. He was, he died, and he was also stuck. I'm going like, what does that tell me about me? Maybe I need to look about where am I stuck? And that is when I discovered, but I'm the one that is stuck. I'm the one that feels stuck in the business, not just because I'm stuck with him at home. That didn't feel so much like the burden. It was like I'm not growing in my business the way I want to grow. And then I realized, if he's stuck, and I'm stuck. Let me focus on me getting unstuck. Because as a life coach, the thing that I work with is that everything around me is like feedback. It's like a mirror. So if I want to change my reflection, I need to change me. And as I'm working on changing me, getting less stuck, being happy with who I am, I'm analyzing all the time what's going on with him, changing that in me, then he is doing so much better. Not necessarily physically always, but definitely mentally. And that makes then caregiving a much easier job, because looking after somebody that is depressed is way harder than somebody that is mentally okay.
Right. Well, I think you packed a lot in there. There are a number of things that do come to my mind, and I'll start with the idea, in leadership development, there is the notion, there's really three layers. To be a leader, you first must lead yourself. So you can't just be something and expect to project outwardly and be effective leading others or leading a bigger enterprise. And by the way, those are the other two levels, leading the immediate team around you and ultimately leading some sort of enterprise. But it's that leading yourself that is often a sticking point for many people. There's this sort of I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, and I'm bound by my own coaching ethics not to try to dabble in that. However, as a coach, as you know, you can't help but you bump right into that all the time. You see presented to you someone who has some pretty serious, psychological elements to the way they're looking at the world and the way they're framing their opinions and attitudes. But when you are dealing with someone who's going through a major medical event or health challenge, you're right. I think a lot of people do slip into that, depression. And I might just sum it up and call it a kind of darkness, that it's an unknown, it's a fear, it's a doubt, it's a threat. And you can even get on into the spiritual issues of how someone thinks about death if the condition is truly ultimately life-threatening. And that's a heavy, heavy burden, heavy load.
But the interesting thing is, so I've developed now the motto of, the fools like to blame others for their problems, and the wise learn from their own, but the genius learns from other people's mistakes. And so now what I'm doing is I'm analyzing him. Okay, so, and not just as an object, but I also talk to him, and that's how then things come up. And I realized one of the biggest challenges for somebody like him is we tend to base our self-esteem on our achievements. And now there are no more achievements because he can't work, and the same with our value. And now it is the challenge to learn to accept, to love yourself just because. That's my theme lately, and I realized I need to learn that within me. I was just fortunate enough that I wasn't in his shoes, but I had the same challenge. Because how are we when we have nothing to show for, when there is no work that we can be proud of, or whatever achievements we identify our self-esteem with? And so I started.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so I started really working on I'm valuable and lovable just because. And lately I've added to that one, I'm happy just because. It's a decision.
Yeah.
All three of them is a decision.
What I was going to bring up, and a lot of my listeners have heard portions of this in the past. I had an opportunity during the great financial crash and crisis of 2008. I was confronted with needing to close a company that I owned, and I had 35 employees, and we were collateral damage because we were related to the financial services business, and that, of course, was ground zero for the big crash. And had to close that company and actually experienced taking a company through bankruptcy as an outcrop of that. But it led me to create my entrepreneurial juices kept going, and I created a nonprofit to support job seekers. And that's really where I sort of honed my own passion for coaching and helping others was through that experience. But to your point, one of the big things we discovered very rapidly as people began coming to our programs, people had lost their identity because they had lost their job. And in '08, the economic condition was such that there were thousands and even millions of people that were losing jobs who had never lost a job before. They were hard workers. They were achievers. They were accomplishing things, and they were enjoying the benefits of it. But now all of a sudden, the company they worked for was on dire straits and made massive reductions of good people. So I had, you know, amazing performers coming through my doors to take part in our programs, but they were like zombies coming through the door. They didn't know who they were anymore. So I actually started my own practice of, as we were having our meetings, I would recognize somebody was new coming in, and I would go up to them and I would say, "Hi, I'm Doug. What's your name?" And they'd tell me, and I'd say, "Tell me something about yourself." And 99 times out of 100, they immediately went into, "Well, I'm an engineer, I'm an accountant, I'm a customer service worker, I'm a programmer, whatever." And I'm like, "Nope, stop. You didn't answer the question." And they would look at me. It was like a cold water in the face. They go, "What are you talking about?" I'd say, "No, I want to know about you. Tell me who you are, not what you are, but who you are." And that kind of set the tone for the journey we were encouraging people to go on, which step one, we had a 6-step program we led everybody through for their job search. We ultimately got to the work of doing job hunting, but there were 3 steps out of the 6 that had to do with reconnecting with your own sense of purpose, value, and meaning so you could get unstuck from that horrible, tragic event of being given a pink slip and ushered out the door with a cardboard box under your arm. And people were, basically rebuilding their lives from the bottom up.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we are so taught to identify with, as you said, your job, your looks, whatever it is, but it's always something external. And it's time to look internally who we are. And if you're a spiritual person, you can look at it as, well, I'm created by the divine, so that means that I must be lovable, kind, helpful. I have all those qualities. It doesn't matter how you look at it, but it's about finding that peace inside, just accepting who we are, warts and all. We're all messy, we're all imperfect, and that's okay.
And for someone who has experienced very serious health challenges, there is a taking away of what was before, and now you've got this new reality to deal with. So, what are some of the things you've tried to do to help your husband, and things you've learned about being that truly helpful caregiver, not just administering the basics, but I mean, really trying to encourage and keep them focused on the right things?
Well, there are several things. First of all, is to not focus on helping them, because when I focus on helping somebody, I'm up here and they are down there, you know. So it is about still respecting them for who they are, who they've always been. And I know often people say, yeah, but we don't have the life that we used to have before. No, but you have a new life. And what makes a life interesting if there is growth? That is what we want. That is an innate desire that we have. So if we cannot now go and travel and see new things, because that's what most people identify that growth with, we can have that personal development. Now, one of the things is that it's about learning to accept our emotions. So that is something that I do with him sometimes. If he's feeling really down, I say, okay, let's just sit with this feeling and allow yourself to feel the feeling. Because when you feel the feeling, and if you, on top of that, there are 2 points on your forehead, like halfway between your eyebrows and where the hairline used to be for the men and where it still is for the women, for most women. But you hold these points and they are called emotional stress release points. They are sort of acupressure points. And that activates your prefrontal cortex. It's something we naturally do. You know how we hold our forehead when we like really want to think? Because we want to activate the prefrontal cortex where our wisdom lies, our problem-solving capabilities lie. And holding those points while you allow yourself to feel the feelings and give yourself permission to feel the feelings, then it prevents you from going down a dark rabbit hole. And too often we're taught, oh, we have to be positive, and we push that emotion, that feeling down. But it always, I'm sure you know, it always will come up. It will pop up until you face it. And you say, it's okay that I feel useless or whatever it is, feel depressed. I give myself permission to feel like that for now. And when you sit with that, then the feeling just subsides. And then maybe another emotion comes up, and then we work through the emotions until we feel calm. So that is one of the things that I've done. Another thing that I do is that I look for ways how he can still support me. So he is choosing now to cook the food most of the days. I tell you, I worship the floor he walks on because I'm so grateful he does most of the cooking. And even if he's not in a good state, he can still cut all the vegetables and do the preparation, and then I can make the food. I still consult with him for advice. You know, if I'm writing a proposal, I'll discuss it with him. So those are things I can do that I still do to make it very manageable. Still draw on his strengths and allow him to support me, and then encourage him also to do things that I'm also doing, like exercise, whatever he can do within his range. But the most important thing is, and that's what he said too, I've stopped trying to fix him. I focused on sorting me out. And then I share my wins with him that can inspire him to also change. That's the biggest change.
Yeah, I think in perhaps, well, I'll just say what I'm thinking. Kind of in my own experience, I think the male of the species is more prone to look for that quick fix rather than work through the discussion about the feelings and the discussion about the emotions and some of the more mental challenges. It's kind of like, yeah, I hear all that. Let's just, how can we fix this? And I think that's classically attributed more to the male mindset than the female. But I think to your point, I've certainly known plenty of female leaders who likewise adopt that mode of, well, if I've got a problem, I'm going to find a solution and we'll move on. And you almost get into sort of this bulldozer mentality of hit a wall, there's a problem. Well, let's just figure out how to, if we can't go over it or around it, we're going to go through it, so let's
But
get
now
busy.
you just said something very important. It's about going through it. When we deal with emotions, we don't talk about it. We experience them because emotions is energy in motion. It's stuck in the body and it will prevent us from unlocking the brain for finding other solutions. So we just focus on the feeling, give ourselves permission to feel it, forgive ourselves for feeling it, and we sit with it until the body starts to feel different. Because when you are angry or depressed, you often have tension in a part of your body, and you just focus on that physical sensation. Because my husband is also not somebody who wants to talk about his feelings, but he can do this because you don't have to talk about it. And then it takes 5, maybe 10 minutes, and then you can move forward and say, okay, what is the solution?
Hmm. Hmm. And I think in a lot of situations, certainly ones that I can think of, for instance, I had a very dear friend and colleague who was diagnosed with cancer almost 2 years ago, and unfortunately did pass away from it. And last August, almost a year ago. And when I think about what he and his own family went through, the diagnosis was the original diagnosis was pretty severe. They said, well, with this kind and this situation, you've probably got 16 to 18 months. And, so he was given the expiry date, and had to learn how to deal with that. He was a champion. He dealt with it incredibly well. But I know his wife and the kids and the family around him all had very different experiences trying to go through that and deal with that and understand it. And it's almost like in his case, he was more the caregiver. He had his own certainty about his death and was not fearful of it. But it was almost like up to a point he was the caregiver, and then
Yeah.
finally the culmination of so many of the treatments and the medicines and everything he was on, just there was a little bit of a final season that he was not functioning, just waiting. And
Yeah.
so, my point there's so many different layers to that. And I think everybody in the immediate circle of friends and family experience those things so differently, and sometimes compounding the challenge rather than assisting with mitigating or, figuring out that new normal and how to live with the current state.
Yeah. Now I want to bring something interesting into the mix here because I have now 30 years of experience working on with the mind body spirit connection. And so I've been trained that every illness has that emotional component or that psychosomatic aspect to it. And there's an amazing healing modality called Germanic healing knowledge. And there is a book, and I can tell people how to get access to that book as well. And it's about the psychic roots of illnesses. And that is what I use to analyze my husband. That is how I found out, oh, Parkinson's and the paralysis is about being stuck. Now, they have all the different cancers in there as well. So I don't know what type of cancer did your friend have, if you know. But for example, if a lot of women have breast cancer, now the emotional issues that is linked to breast cancer is that often that they feel they've lost somebody in their family. It's a nest conflict. Like you lost somebody in the family, or you want to throw somebody out of your family, out of your nest. And when you understand that issue, what your partner is going through, then you can start also looking at like, how is this issue relevant for me? And as I unpack then how that issue is relevant for me, then I can assist my partner better. For example, also Alzheimer's and dementia and all of that. It's about not wanting to remember things. And I've seen it with people. They can be coherent until they hit a very painful memory, and all of a sudden they lose it. Then can start looking at myself. Where am I not willing to remember because it's too painful? Where am I not dealing with those emotional hurts? Let me find a way to deal with it, and then maybe I can assist my partner with it, or maybe it is something between the two of us.
Yeah.
But that brings that other element in of identifying what is it that they struggle with and name it, that then I can look at where I'm having the same.
Powerful. Really, really significant. I'm well, so many thoughts going through my mind right now. I'm having to process a little bit here. Um, what do you think is there? I don't want to dumb this down, but what is your idea of a first step when you find yourself as an individual going into this season of a challenge? A loved one is diagnosed with something that is going to be significant. Is there a first step?
Is to deal with your own emotions around it, of accepting this is what it is. It's not going to go away. I don't have to pretend that I've got it together. I'll find a way through this. And yes, well, everybody's going to die one day, so let's make this the best we can. But the acceptance is the first part, and then also forgiveness plays a huge role. Forgiving yourself for not being able to prevent it, forgiving yourself for maybe not being the best caregiver, forgiving yourself for whatever it is that you feel you need to forgive yourself for, because that makes then that you can be much calmer and kinder when you're dealing with that other person. Because you don't want to have unresolved emotional issues, and then that partner of yours is going to push those buttons, and then you are not kind and helpful. You're going to be irritated and angry. That helps nobody.
Right, right. Well, Hanna, this has been great, and thank you for sharing. What's the best way people can reach out and get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more?
Well, I actually have a gift for your listeners, and that is because I also have developed a web-based app where they are recordings, they're audio programs that can help with or support people in their mindset. And for those of you that are watching it on video, they can scan the QR code on my background, and otherwise you can go to Hanna Kok. Hanna, you can spell it with the H at the end or without the H, because I know English people have that tendency, always put that H at the end. Even if I say it's without, it's okay. And KOK is the surname. So they can go to hannakok.com, and then they can get this app. They can get it for free for 35 days and play around with it. And then once they're on it, they will automatically have also access to my email address, so they can reach out as well. And if they sign up for this, then they will get access to that book that I spoke to you about. They will get, if they go in that program, there is a user guide and resources guide, and they will find those books, the psychic roots of illnesses, and also a book about breast cancer they can download for free.
Wonderful.
I think that would be the easiest.
Well, as always, folks, we will have those references in the show notes. So please, if you're out and about and streaming this, find a safe place and go check out the show notes, and you'll get those links. But one last time, Hanna, thank you for sitting in. I really appreciate your sharing, and thank you for your work.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I also want to say thank you for the listeners for taking time out of your lives to listen to this podcast. And look after yourself, because the better you look after yourself, the better you can look after your loved one.
Great message. Well, folks, I think we're on the end here. I do want to remind you, we do have a video version of this over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Go over there, check out our archives, and we are rapidly building the library there. We're in the 400s of our episode count. So we've got a lot of content, a lot of great guests that have shared and been part of this journey. But with that, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.